like to welcome everyone here this evening. We'll be studying in Jeremiah 40 and 41 this evening. Before we begin this evening, Roger, would you lead us in a word of prayer, please?
Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we're so thankful for this day that you have given us. We pray that you will be with us this evening as we study your word. We pray that we will open our minds that we might learn more from thee and that we might teach it to others. We pray, Father, that you'll be with those who are lower number that are not here because of sickness. We pray that you'll heal their bodies so they can once again assemble with us. We pray for those who are on the road and not here because they're traveling. We pray that you will be with them. We ask, Father, that you will forgive us for our sins. Be with us tonight. Help us to open our minds, as you said, and learn from thee. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. And Jeff, tell me when I get out of frame. Probably about right here, I would guess. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. This evening we'll be looking at some background material, more background material, because this is a rather short lesson. It's only one page of questions, basically, one question on the next page, and a few digging deeper. So it's one of the shortest lessons that we have. So we'll go back and look at a little bit of the background. One of the digging deepers, anyway, in last week's lesson was to look at the account of the destruction of Jerusalem in 2 Kings. So we'll take a look at that. Someone want to read 2 Kings 25, 1 through 6, please. 2 Kings 25, 1 through 6. And I apologize for not re-looking at that slide. It's not projecting exactly right.
Okay, now in the 9th year of his reign, on the 10th day of the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came, he and all his army against Jerusalem, camped against it, and built a siege wall all around it. So the city was under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. On the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine was so severe in the city that there was no food for the people of the land. Then the city was broken into, and all the men of war fled by night by way of the gate between the two walls beside the king's garden. So the Chaldeans were all around the city, and they went by way of the Arab. But the army of the Chaldeans pursued the king and overtook him in the plains of Jericho, and all his army was scattered from him. Then they captured the king and brought him to the king of Babylon at Riblah, and he passed sentence on him.
Okay. So it was at Riblah where they picked him up in the plains of Jericho. I think we all know where that was. From Sunday, does anybody remember where Riblah was? We talked about that and went to a map on that. Anybody remembers? Yeah, we'll look at a map later on. Somebody go ahead and read 8 through 10, 11. Roger, go ahead. Your turn there.
Now the 7th day of the 5th month, which was the 9th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, the servant of the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. He burned the house of the Lord, the king's house, all the houses of Jerusalem, even every great house he burned with fire. So all the army of the Chaldeans
And 12 also, I'm sorry.
The captain of the guard left some of the poorest of the land to vine dressers and plowmen.
So again, here there wasn't much different from what Jeremiah talked about. They burned the whole city. That started about the 15th of August, our time, mid-August. And it took more than a few days to do that. Tearing down the walls of Jerusalem took several days, months possibly. So it, weeks rather. So it is here. So again, most of the people that were left in Jerusalem were taken into exile in Babylon. The others, some were slain there at Riblah, and then some of the poorest were left in Judah to tend the fields and the vineyards. Someone want to read 13 through 17 now? Okay. So these pillars were how tall in feet, approximately?
Would you say I didn't hear you?
How, yeah, if you can't hear me, let me know. I'll raise this up a little bit more. How tall were these pillars in feet?
18 cubits is what one pillar was.
Yeah, which is cubits, and a cubit is what, about 1.5 foot? So how many feet would it be?
27 feet.
27 foot. And then on top of that, 4.5 foot. So around 30 feet or so for these pillars. These are the two that, what was it, Jachin and Boaz? Were that the two names of the two pillars? Jeff, you remember? I think it was. The two pillars were named. So these pillars were taken then. They basically took everything out of there because they were going to tear down the temple and burn the support beams, and then everything would collapse and then knock down the rubble that was left. Now, one of the things that we can look at here, if I keep at the right place, you've got the 597 deportation. When Jehoiachin was taken to Babylon. And note that all the treasures, which is talked about, and all the vessels of gold, Second Chronicles modifies that a bit and says that some of the articles of the house of the Lord. And then you have all of these things that are over here. Obviously, the bronze pillars that stand in the Bronze Sea, which were out in the outer courtyard, were not taken. But bronze is not as expensive as silver and gold. So basically what you have here in the deportation in 597, the most easily collected things were taken back. Second Chronicles 36, when it's summarizing the thing, it talks about the valuable articles. However, they cleaned the places out. And 11 years later, after the second deportation, obviously some of the fine gold and fine silver pieces had been replaced. Or they may have not been taken at first, since they were not that heavy. The things that were heaviest in gold probably were taken. So there's not a conflict between these two deportations. You've got 11 years, and any of the things that might have been taken at this time could easily have been replaced in the 11 years with substitutes of silver and gold. So we have that. Okay. Jeff, can you hit that one light for the map? The very last one. Toward the door. You're basically around a 1,000-mile trek. Ribla is right up here. There's a mountain range on this side and a mountain range here. The Orontes River winds out here and empties into the Mediterranean. Right about in here is basically a continental divide type thing. The Jordan River starts around Mount Hermon here and flows southward. The Orontes River runs northward. So you've got a little bit of a continental divide here type of thing. So you've got two water basins that are here. But Ribla is a good little ways up here. About 300 miles, a little bit less than 300 miles, 250 miles or so. And that's where they took them. Of course, Jericho's right about here, and they took them back and took the hill road up and then hit the road through between the two mountain ranges and went up to Ribla. Okay. So Ribla is right up here, and it's a strategic place for coming down Carchemish, which Egypt had, which Babylon defeated Egypt in 605, right before they came down and took Jerusalem. So we have this major trade route. And remember, there's also a trade route that's on this side that goes up. This is a little bit more well-watered this way because the other mountain range that's on this side pulls some more of the water out. So it's a little bit drier on this side. Okay, you can kick the lights back on. You can go ahead and kick the lights on, Jeff. Okay. So that gets us up to the place where we're actually starting. Almost gets us to the place where we're actually starting tonight's lesson. So, and we'll talk a little bit more of the things that we talked about before. Eric, you want to take number 1 there on lesson 18? Okay. So Jeremiah was given special treatment here by the Babylonians, and it kind of reminds one of Joshua, the second chapter, where Rahab told the spies, "We have heard of the great deeds that God has done in releasing you from Egypt, and how God defeated the people in the Transjordan region before the Israelites." So the word about what was happening, we talked about that quite a bit on Sunday morning. And here's the actual passages on that. Someone want to read that first one?
Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face and did homage to Daniel, and gave orders to present to him an offering and fragrant incense. The king answered Daniel and said, "Surely your God is a God of gods, and a Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries, since you have been able to reveal this mystery."
Okay, so this, Steve Rudd dates this about 602. It was definitely prior to 586, no question about that. It might have been a little bit later. It could have been it was probably in the 600 to 602, right in that time frame. So Nebuchadnezzar knew about the God of the Israelites. And I stopped in that paragraph because it goes on and says that what was the rest of the paragraph there? What would have been the rest of the paragraph? It talks about what honor he gave to Daniel.
He was ruler over the whole province.
And what else?
And the chief prefect over all the wise men.
Okay. So he had a civil role as a ruler over the district of Babylon, and he was also the chief of all the wise men of Babylon. In this position, he would have been with Nebuchadnezzar quite a bit, more than most people would have been. Knowing Daniel's character, there's no question that he would have talked about Jehovah with him. So Nebuchadnezzar got word of that. He definitely knew about the Lord of Daniel. And then the fiery furnace, this next thing, we won't have anybody read that, but note there, again, therefore I make a decree that any people, nation, or language that speaks anything offensive against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses reduced to a rubbish heap, inasmuch as there is no other God who is able to deliver in this way. Then goes on, grants them the rulership of the city of Babylon, as opposed to the district of Babylon. So you've got 4 Jews here that are in close proximity to Nebuchadnezzar. So the likelihood of him hearing about the God of Israel from them was great. And then we also mentioned the fact that Jeremiah's letter that he had sent, Chris was putting it in the 593 time frame, 592, 593, right before Ezekiel, right as Ezekiel was starting his prophecies. Other folks have a little bit earlier date, putting it in the realm of 597, the second deportation around that time frame. Either way, we're talking about the early to mid 590s for that. So that letter was not something that was hidden. It was not something that was written in symbolical language. It was a clear message for the people to settle down and get ready for a stay in Babylon. The 70 years of exile was there, so that letter, surely Nebuchadnezzar would have gotten information about that. So he would have Jeremiah with the letter that said to be good citizens, plant and reap, and marry off your children. You go ahead and marry and have a family. So there's all of that, plus you obviously are going to have spies in Judea. So the prophecies that Jeremiah had been making since, what year did Jeremiah start making prophecies? At the time of the destruction of Jerusalem, it had been about 40 years. Well, we need to get that number pegged down pretty well. Chris mentioned it several different times. When did somebody start to say it? 627, yeah. 627 is when he started, so roughly 40 years. The siege started 40 years after that. So 627, he had been prophesying about 40 years by the time of the destruction of Jerusalem. There's no question that Nebuchadnezzar had a good intelligence unit. So the prophecies that Jeremiah was making would have been known in Babylon. There's no question about that. So that would account for the gentle treatment Nebuchadnezzar gave. Now, to say all that, that's how God's providence protected Daniel, because I don't want to discount and leave out the fact that it was God's providence that Jeremiah would be taken care of, because that's the overriding fact on it. But the tools that he used were probably Daniel and his three friends, and the prophecies that Jeremiah had been making for 40 years would have come to the attention of the king. So you have, it makes perfect sense when you look at the whole picture of what's happening, that he would be treated well. Okay. Now, let's see, do I want to go to... We're going to look at one other thing here. Who was appointed to be governor after Zedekiah was blinded and taken to exile? Yeah. Yeah, Gedaliah is the way I pronounce it. You may have been closer to right, but Gedaliah. Remember that from the time of Josiah, it had been the sons of Josiah that had been kings, with the exception of Jehoiachin, who was king for 3 months, that were kings. So you have the royal family. What family was Gedaliah from? He was a descendant of Zadok, who was a descendant of Eleazar. He was a priest. He was of the priestly lineage. So you have a priest rather than a royal being in charge after Babylon takes over. So that's something we need to probably keep in mind, because it makes quite a bit of difference, because as he seems to be of the Aaronical priesthood that believed what Jeremiah said. He seems to have. We'll look at that in the next question. But remember that it was Ramah where Jeremiah was taken to, which is on the main road that goes along the crest of the hills, basically. And then Gedaliah was headquartered at Mizpah, which is a little bit further north of Ramah. Okay. Eric G., you want to take number 2?
What counsel did Josiah the governor do to the captains of the forces and the peoples who lived in the land? He said, "Do not be afraid to serve the Chaldeans, and you stay in the land and serve the king of Babylon, and that you stay at Mizpah and stand before the Chaldeans for them."
Okay. So, what did anyone, the counsel that Gedaliah gave, what does that match?
Jeremiah's prophecy of what the people should do.
Yeah. The word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah of what the people should do. So he was adhering to what Jeremiah had said. And you have, so he is following what God said to do. And other people heard that had ran out of the country during the years of war that Babylon had there. The folks that were in Moab, Ammon, Edom, and other places heard that there was a remnant, and they went back there to Gedaliah at Mizpah. And then they did do what Gedaliah said, and they gathered a lot of fruit and grapes. Why did they gather a lot of grapes? Why did they gather a lot of grapes?
There was no food in Jerusalem.
Okay, because of the siege, there wasn't any food there. But why did they gather a lot of grapes? It's not a hard question.
For what?
What?
For what? For why?
To eat and to press into grape juice and then to store. But why? Why did the 10 spies that Joshua sent up in, that Moses sent up into the land, why did they bring back a lot of grapes?
To show that it was a land of abundance.
But,
I feel like they didn't trust what was going on with God for them too.
okay. But it's even more simple than that. Why did they have bunches of grapes to bring back?
There's a lot.
Huh?
There's plenty.
But why?
I'm not sure what you're looking for. Harvest time?
It was harvest time. Grapes come into production in August and September. Jerusalem was breached in the middle of July. The events that we're reading about right now are taking place between the middle of July and the middle of October. We're in the grape harvest time. So they were able to have that abundance. But again, providentially, God did that at that time, had that done at that time, because that was when the harvest was. They would have plenty of food and sustenance there. So I tend not to ask too hard of questions usually. Some of them are so obvious that you'll overlook them. So don't overlook the obvious. Okay, so Gedaliah was there. They came there, and they gathered the wine and summer fruit. The figs are in production then to one of the cycles of the figs would be at this time, because the figs reproduce all during the growing season from about May to into October. So it's they put on fruit continuously during that time. Okay. Any other comments about this paragraph or questions? Note that it may go well with you. Whenever we do what God says to do, it will go well with us. Now, we may have trials, we may have tribulations, but in the end, it's going to work out for the best for us. So it will always go well for you when you follow what God says to do. Okay. Number 4. Brother Fox, you want to do that? And be cognizant of that. It kind of overlaps into the next question, so you just have a very short answer there. Yeah, who did this? Oh, I'm sorry, number 3. Number 3, sorry. I ran ahead of myself.
He was telling him that Ishmael was coming to take Gedaliah's life, and Johanan wanted to go kill Ishmael.
Okay. One of the things that we need to understand here, and the next chapter talks about it, and I don't think it says it here. Ishmael was a descendant of the royal lineage, it says in the next chapter. He was not of the exactly kingly lineage, but he was of David's family. So you have here a thing where Ishmael probably didn't like the idea that a person from the tribe of Levi was in charge and not a person from the lineage of David. So that probably has a little bit to bear on this. So he had crossed the Jordan to Ammon. When you cross the Jordan, from Jericho and cross it, which way is Ammon after you cross it? South, yeah. So if you go if you go due east from Jerusalem, cross the Jordan, and go and get in the Transjordan area, Ammon's territory was just south of that line. So he went over to Ammon and went to the people there. One thing about Gedaliah, he was probably a little bit too trusting. He had some sage advice given to him. However, he did not follow that. Okay. Now we get in. Roger, you want to take the next question? This is the one that actually flows over. It's just 1 through 3. Number 4.
Okay. Who did Ishmael son of Hezekiah kill? He killed Gedaliah and all who were with him, including some Chaldeans who were there.
Okay, so all those folks that had come from Moab and Ammon and other countries around about Israel and were with Gedaliah at Mizpah were killed, at least the men of war. Note that that's qualified by the men of war. So you got the 20 and up, probably 20 to 60 normally is what it's considered, but it literally it's 20 and up. So you have the men of war that were killed that were with him. He had a group of 10 men with him. So we have that. Mark, you want to take number 5? Yep. So you have those people that are here. One of the things that's odd about this chapter is that, with the exception of house of the Lord, there's nothing in 41 that talks about the Lord. It's strictly a historical account here, and we'll talk about that a little bit more maybe tonight. But before we do, here's a graphical representation. The walls of Jerusalem were breached. This chart has about here, but it was probably about the end of Tammuz, the middle of in the July time frame. And then you have the summer fruits coming on in August and September, which includes that. And then the assassination of Gedaliah was sometime in the September, October time frame here. Again, you've got where Ramah and Mizpah, where that was taken care of. Now, when we're looking at what he did there, Ishmael was one that was willing to take a bribe, and that's basically why he left the 10 men alive, they offered him essentially what amounts to a bribe to do that. But let's look at a thing that we have here. When they came from Shiloh and Samaria, their beards were shaved, their clothes torn, and their bodies gashed. Because they were going to bring that to the house of the Lord, because they were mourning. They probably knew about the fact that the temple had been destroyed, or however, it's possible that they didn't. The word didn't get back to Babylon, to the refugees, the exilees in Babylon, until about January. It was confirmed to them. And so there's a slight possibility that they didn't know that that this had occurred. But more probably what this is talking about, they were bringing it to the vicinity of Jerusalem so they would offer there. They probably knew that the house of the Lord had been destroyed. And this is the only time in Jeremiah 41 that the Lord is mentioned, period. And it's talking about the house of the Lord. Now, the things that they had done, were they authorized to be done for the Jews? It's not a yes or no answer. You've got to look at each one of the things. How about gashing themselves? No. That was prohibited by the law of Moses. They weren't to do that. What about tearing the clothes? Well, that was not prohibited. So they could tear their clothes. What about cutting off their beards? That was prohibited. Prohibited. So, two of the three things that they did were prohibited by the law of Moses. Now, whether this is because they were ignorant of the law, which there's not a bad likelihood that they were ignorant of the law, or it was because they had adopted a syncretic religion where they took pagan ideas and put it into the worship of God. We don't know for sure, but two of the three things that they had done were not authorized. So although these folks thought they were doing the right thing, two of the things that they were doing were prohibited by the law of Moses. A person can do things that they think are honoring the Lord, but if it's not authorized or if it's prohibited in the law of the Lord, either one, then it's not pleasing to the Lord. So we have to make sure that we know what the law of the Lord has in it, what's authorized to be done, do what's authorized, stay away from that which is prohibited, and leave it at that. Don't go beyond what the word of the Lord says. Okay. Lord willing, we'll pick up there on question 6, finishing up the chapter 41. Thank you.